So I'm 9 years old and I'm sitting at the kitchen table. And I just come back from Hebrew school, and I learned something in Hebrew school that I was really excited about. It was about Rosh Hashanah, and something about how, on Rosh Hashanah we have this opportunity to look back at the past year and see how we'd like to grow for the next year, and how that's kind of different from like the secular New Year where people sort of party and drink and that kind of thing. And I'm telling that story, and I'm sitting at the kitchen table, at dinner table, and I hear something like, "What's that garbage they're teaching you in Hebrew school?" And I feel like my hands clenched in fists and like this tightness in my chest, and I'm staring down at, we had this like fake wood tablecloth, and I'm staring at like this sort of Formica fake wood table, and I'm just feeling so sad and empty, and just feeling like, oh, I wish I could learn more about this so that maybe I could explain it in a way that would help people understand. So fast forward about 10 years, and I'm in college, and I'm in the Orthodox community, and I'm sitting at a Shabbat table in the Orthodox community, and I'm talking about something about how all Jews should be able to talk to each other and connect to each other, and how that's really important. And I hear something like, "We don't have to care about those other Jews because they're not Orthodox." And now, like, my fists are clenched, and my chest is tight again. Now I'm staring at a lace tablecloth. And I'm just feeling like so frustrated and angry because like we're all a family and we should be able to talk to each other, and we can't even seem to talk to each other. So fast forward another couple of years, and I'm in a Jewish Unity conference that I tried to organize to deal with this issue. And it's not really going that well. I'm feeling kind of frustrated. And I'm in this breakout section with Arthur Waskow. And he is talking about the Jewish environmental movement and about Jews connecting on the environment, and about the environment and how important it is. And I raise my hand and I say, "But is anybody actually doing anything that really makes a difference here?" And he said, "Yes. There's this organization, the Coalition on the Environment in Jewish Life. And they're doing all this really great work and bringing together Jews from all these different denominations and from all parts of the Jewish world to work together to protect the environment. And I feel hopeful and inspired and excited to see a place where Jews can actually come together and work together and make a difference in something that really matters." And I chose to apply to work for the Coalition on the Environment in Jewish Life the next year, and I became their legislative assistant. And that's how I began my career as a Jewish environmentalist. So, okay, so why do we tell stories? Yeah?
To share an idea, to influence, to learn.
Okay. One more example. One more answer. Why do we tell stories?
Because they evoke an emotion and a challenge, and often an overcoming or a moral.
Great. So I'd like you to consider that storytelling is a practice of leadership. And what we mean, so it explains who we are, what we're doing, and what we care about. And what we mean by leadership is enabling others to achieve shared purpose in the face of uncertainty. That's what a leader does. A leader has to face uncertainty and allow others to achieve a shared purpose together. So, and then storytelling plays a leadership role there because it creates purpose in the face of uncertainty. And it creates an atmosphere in which we and the people we're leading are willing to have courage in the face of uncertainty. Courage without knowing what the outcome will be. So it's not just about telling any story. This leadership practice is not just about telling any story. We want to tell a story that moves people. So we can do this by thinking about what stories we create through our actions, and thinking about sharing stories that other people would want to be a part of. So good organizing, actually, if you go to the next slide. One more? Okay. So good organizing requires the engagement of our heart, our heads, and our hands and feet. So it requires strategy and action, but it also requires motivation. And so oftentimes when we're doing organizing, we focus exclusively on strategy, on action, or we go straight from strategy into action. But the motivation, and where does that lead? I actually find most of the time where that leads is to burnout. Like, I think that when we see burnout in communities, it's because of that. It's because we either started with the head, the strategy, and moved into the hands and feet, the action, or we just started doing action without doing any of that. So that the reason that happens is because the motivation that's needed to make real commitments and sacrifices doesn't come from good ideas. It doesn't come from strategy. It comes from values and emotions that move us and motivate us to act. So how do we tap into values and emotions to motivate ourselves and others to act? Stories can be that source of motivation. Stories move us to act because they tap into our values and they make us feel. And telling stories, the act of public narrative, is a leadership skill that focuses on motivation. So we're not going to talk much about strategy today. We're going to talk about motivation, how you touch people at their hearts with stories. So you can use stories to motivate yourself and others to act, to motivate. That's what it's for. You use stories to motivate yourselves and others to act, and that's what we're going to be learning how to do today. So now I want to talk about how narrative works. Next slide. Right. Okay, that's where I want to be. Okay. So there are two ways of knowing, and you can follow along in your participant guide if it's hard to see this, but there are two ways of knowing, and like I was explaining, there's this strategy and the narrative piece. So analytic knowing, the strategy side, is how we engage the head, and that's the what. So that's really important. We need to know what we're going to do. Have you ever worked in an organization? Oh, sorry.
No, that's okay.
Have you ever worked with an organization that didn't have much in the strategy or the head part? Has anybody ever been part of that, right?
Yes.
It's really,
It's
there's,
annoying.
right, there's no focus, there's no, it feels like a mess, right? So that's really important. The head part is important. But you also need to engage their hearts. So narrative speaks to our hearts, and it's our hearts that move us, that enable us to go beyond thinking to acting. And this is the motivational piece, it's the narrative piece. You need motivation to get people to join you in your strategy, and that's what gets to action. You need both pieces in order to get to action. Okay, so why all this focus on emotions? Because that's not something that we usually talk about. So if you can go to the next slide. So the reason we're talking about emotions today is because emotions are signals that tell us what we value in ourselves, in others, and in the world. So, and we don't think our values, we feel our values, right? So sometimes people will be like, I value this, I value that, but really, values are not a thing that we have that are in our head. They're in our hearts. We feel them. We experience them. So we're happy when something we value is working out or we're close to it, and we're sad when something we value is gone, and we're angry when something we value is taken away or violated, and we're afraid when something we value is threatened. So emotions are actually signals telling us what we value. So, and emotions reflect those values, and they motivate us to act on our values. So it's the emotions that actually make us move and do what we need to do. So we need to tap into emotions to move us beyond thinking about how to act and make us actually act. So, okay, go ahead. Slide. So when we talk about what's important to us through stories. So when we talk about what's important to us, we express that through stories. So if I told you protecting the environment is important to me, does that inspire you? What does it really tell you about me? It really tells you very little about me. But if I told you about the time that I worked in the EPA office in San Francisco, and we drove way out of San Francisco up the California coast, and we flew over to Nevada to see tribes that were struggling with the environmental impacts around them. And the people there told me that the horses were getting asthma from the mines that were around there. And they were so grateful for the grant money that we as EPA were giving to them. So can you feel that more? Does that tell you more about me? Right? It's not just about horses with asthma, but it gives you a sense of who I am, and it also gives you a sense of who you are because of the way you react to that story. So narrative conveys values, not just concepts, and they bring us into the narrator's emotional world. And when we feel what the narrator is feeling, that enables us to empathize with the narrator. And so because of how we feel when we hear that story, it helps us not just learn about the speaker, but also about ourselves. So emotions help us understand our values, and we convey values through stories, and in that way stories can move people to action. So let's look a little closer at what makes a story. Okay, so this is the story structure. So we're going to go back to high school English for a minute. Okay, so I'm trying to, if this is not easy for you to see,